Morning, all. I'm going to give a talk this morning about a word from my glossary again. I spent a long time writing this glossary, quite a number of years ago, but I still like some of my definitions, or maybe even most of them. So the word is improvise, and that is the title of the talk. And here's the definition. Understanding that experiences are in flux, it serves us well to improvise. That is, to creatively respond to what's in front of us. This is best informed by what we have learned from reflecting on experience. Since the matrix of experiences is never quite the same, this requires flexibility and awareness. So that was my definition in the glossary. And here are some more thoughts on it. So what we're doing when we're improvising is usually it has to be pretty spontaneous, or at least quite quickly respond from what's coming to us in the moment. And usually how we respond is a kind of mishmash or blend or synthesis or integration of what we've learned from previous experiences that have some similarities, because it's never quite the same. And we don't have the time to cognitively consider it. But sometimes, or maybe usually in our improvisation, we know it, we've known it from past experience on some other level, not necessarily something we could cognitively describe. And then we implement it into action or words, which of course are a form of action. And hopefully we're able to somehow or other, in that kind of almost mysterious way, call up and respond with what has been most viable, what's really worked out best in past experiences. Though sometimes we're going to repeat the same thing over and over again, especially when we're feeling reactive. And I'll get to that in a moment. So to be able to, this is a lot of why we reflect on experience, why we do what we do here together, why we take 10 minutes after the meditation to reflect on it. In a way, we're reinforcing what we've learned, what we've gone through in our meditation. And so hopefully later on, when we need to respond to something that's somewhat similar, what we've learned is more accessible. And I don't just mean the 10 minutes of reflecting afterwards, because of course reflection happens in the meditation itself, but also importantly, the sharing that comes from the last 10 minutes. We're really reflecting on what happened in our meditation, and part of that is, how did it go? What did we learn? Now, when we reflect, never mind, that was the wrong starting of that sentence. But what we remember when we're called upon to improvise again in our experience is not this conscious kind of remembering, the kind of remembering we're sort of habituated to think of as remembering, but a kind of remembering where it's in us somehow, somewhere, we don't know how, and not necessarily all of it, but somehow we have learned from experience. So I thought an interesting experience last week about this kind of knowing that's not at all cognitive, or seemingly not. So I had a lovely Thanksgiving, long-term friends, created family. It was it was a very pleasant event. And then I returned home and I got quite depressed. This is not a usual mood for me, and I really didn't get it. Like, what is going on? Like, that, nothing wrong went on at Thanksgiving. Like, what is this? But then, and so I just kind of went through the evening, and the moods sort of dissipated after a while. But the next day I reflected upon it, and I came up with a provisional understanding that makes sense to me. So 20 years ago, exactly 2004, my mom was dying. She was in a dying process, and it was cancer. So we sort of knew what was coming, and so I asked her literally, I said, could you please wait until after Thanksgiving? Because I had a whole plan. I was taking a leave of absence from work, and then I could be with her, and I could take care of her more. I was already taking care of her to some extent, but I could really be around. So she took me literally. And somehow, and I'm not sure, and I'm sure this wasn't cognitive, she was in a coma when I went to her house immediately after Thanksgiving dinner that year. And she died the following day. And of course, how did that work? That wasn't like, oh, I'm going to die when my daughter comes home from Thanksgiving because she asked me to wait until after Thanksgiving. No, I don't know how that worked, but somehow that's what happened. And so last week, this Thanksgiving 2024, on the anniversary of her dying, not the date, but the relationship to Thanksgiving, it was known to me through my mood. There are many ways of knowing, and sometimes we can know through our moods and feelings. So back to this word improvise. When we need to respond to life, we can't always pause and consider our best next move. And I try to pause, especially when I'm feeling reactive. But of course I can't always do this, but when I have the conditions are right for me to pause, I don't have to respond right away. I don't have to improvise. And I have the awareness that I'm being triggered or reactive. Then I really try to not act or in words or actions immediately, but really pause and reflect. Really consider what triggered me and how to best respond. And of course, there's this multiplicity of conditions that I can hopefully become more aware of. I can draw upon my past experiences, knowledge of situations or the persons I'm relating to, considering my vulnerabilities, their vulnerabilities, and so much more. But when I'm triggered, I can't do that. I have to reflect, because when I'm triggered, and this is, the new-ish brain understanding, when I'm triggered, I don't have mental flexibility. My brain is hijacked and I'm prone to respond with fight or flight. So it really takes more time to imagine more creative and effective responses. Again, often conditions are not right for this. We have to improvise. We have to respond. We have to act more quickly. But back to those conditions that trigger us, I think it's really helpful when they come up in meditation. Some people think, oh, that's not meditation. We should get, not rid of maybe, but, refocus our attention away from things like that. But in meditation, we actually have the time to sit with them and try on different responses, which could be another word for improvising. And hopefully through this process, we see perhaps a different way through. And again, this often comes up in meditation idiosyncratically. When you listen to people talk about their sittings, you're going to hear this sometimes, that it comes up through metaphor or visualization or a flash of knowing or some other unexpected way. You fill in the blanks there, because it comes through to us differently. Now, of course, we can't always or even usually know how things will go, since, back to my definition in the glossary, since the matrix of conditions is never quite the same. But we can practice in meditation and life, try out some new creative moves or words that skillfully and appropriately respond to the conditions we find ourselves in. So I'm going to end with one of my favorite quotes. Some of you have heard it before. This quote is by J. Garfield, and it was from a training several of us took at Barry's Center for Buddhist Studies, which was called How to Be a Person Without a Self. Turns out I thought that would be the title of the book he was about to publish, but they changed the title to maybe something a little less esoteric, which is Losing Ourselves, Learning to Live Without a Self. I think that title's problematic too. At any rate, I love the quote, which is, to see oneself as a character in a play with no special protagonists being performed or written on the fly by a vast improv collective. I love thinking of us collectively as a vast improv collective. So with that, I'm going to end the talk and we shall meditate. We'll do our usual meditate for 30 minutes in silence, and we'll have 10 minutes for reflection.